Hello, family. Enjoy this relaxing moment with Surly Tales. Remember to hit the like button, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. It means the world to us. Also, share this video with your friends and loved ones, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. Part 2. The Final 10 and a Growing Storm. The air inside Obi Resort was thick with anticipation. The once light-hearted competition had transformed into an intense, psychological battlefield. 10 women remained. Each one had survived challenges meant to test their intelligence, endurance, and ability to navigate pressure. But now, with the numbers dwindling, the reality of the competition became sharper. This wasn't just about proving themselves anymore. This was about winning. And at the heart of it all was Regina. She had unwittingly become the biggest threat in the game. Not because she flaunted her connection with Chuks, but because she didn't. The other women saw it. The way he looked at her. The way he tried not to let his eyes linger too long in her direction. The whispers had begun circulating like wildfire. She's not even trying to flirt with him, and yet he's obsessed with her. What's the point of competing if we already know who's going to win? She shouldn't be here. But Regina stayed silent. She knew that every move she made was being scrutinized, not just by the contestants, but by Chuks himself. And she wasn't sure how much longer she could keep pretending this was just a game. Chuks' growing torment. Alone in his study, Chuks Obi paced the length of the room, struggling with the weight of his emotions. He had built this contest to be fair, calculated, and methodical. A process that would lead him to a partner based on logic rather than fleeting attraction. Yet every time he looked at Regina, he felt that logic crumble. Kunnel entered the study without knocking, watching his friend with mild amusement. "You're struggling," Kunnel said, pouring himself a drink. Chuks exhaled sharply. "I'm not struggling." Kunnel smirked. "You're lying. And you're bad at it." Chuks turned to him, frustration flashing in his dark eyes. "I can't just pick her. That would make everything I built look like a joke." Kunnel raised an eyebrow. "So, let me get this straight. You're making yourself suffer because you don't want to look biased." Chuks hesitated. "It's not that simple." Kunnel leaned forward. "Let me ask you something, Chuks. If Regina wasn't here, would you have fallen for any of the other women?" Chuks opened his mouth to respond, then stopped. Kunnel saw the hesitation and nodded knowingly. "You already have your answer, my friend. Now you just need the guts to accept it." The next challenge, the test of loyalty. The contestants gathered in the grand ballroom, their nerves taut as they awaited the next challenge. Chuks entered, his face unreadable, his usual commanding presence even sharper than before. "This next challenge is crucial," he began. "Loyalty is one of the most important traits in business, in life, and in relationships. Today, you will be tested on where your loyalties truly lie." The screen behind him flickered on. Challenge 3, the Betrayal Test. Murmurs spread through the room. Betrayal? What kind of test was this? "You will be placed in teams and given a simulated business crisis," Chuks explained. "Within each group, one of you will secretly be offered a deal to sabotage your own team in exchange for personal gain." He let the weight of his words settle. "Some of you will make the wrong choice. Some of you will prove why you deserve to be here." Silence fell. Every woman in the room felt the unspoken threat behind those words. Regina's decision. Regina was grouped with Adamma, Zainab, and Ifeoma, some of the strongest remaining contestants. They were given a business scenario involving a high-stakes corporate merger, a deal that could either be saved or destroyed depending on their decisions. What they didn't know was that Chuks had secretly planted a test within the test. A fake investor approached each of them separately, offering them a private advantage if they sabotaged their own team. Adamma hesitated, and then accepted the deal. Ifeoma followed, choosing personal gain. Zainab stayed neutral, conflicted. And Regina? She flat out refused. "You don't build trust by betraying people," she said coldly. "If Chuks is looking for a real partner, he's looking for someone who will have his back, not someone who would stab it." Her words felt personal. Because this wasn't just a business challenge. This was about Chuks and her past. And the moment of truth was coming. The betrayal revealed. At the end of the challenge, Chuks stood before the contestants, his expression sharp as he addressed the room. This challenge wasn't just about making deals, he said. It was about seeing who would put themselves first at the cost of others. The large screen flickered, showing the hidden footage of Adamma and Adamma accepting the secret deals. Gasps filled the room. Adamma's face paled. Adamma looked away, ashamed. "You were brilliant in execution," Chuks said, "but you sold your team out for personal gain." He shook his head. "That's not the kind of woman I want beside me." With that, Adamma and Adamma were eliminated. And Regina, once again, had proven her worth. A night of chaos and a tragedy. That evening, a storm rolled in over Obi Resort. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Regina, restless after the intense day, stepped out onto the balcony of her villa, staring at the heavy rain pouring down. A scream, followed by a crash. Regina's heart stopped as she turned toward the sound. One of the resort's vehicles had skidded on the slippery roads and lost control, plunging into a ravine. Without thinking, she ran into the rain, ignoring the chaos around her. She saw the wreckage. Someone was inside. She didn't hesitate. She climbed down toward the vehicle, trying to help, and then, a loud snap. The ground beneath her gave way. She barely had time to scream before she tumbled down the slope, and everything went black. Chuks' moment of reckoning. When Chuks arrived at the scene, his world stopped. Regina lay unconscious on the ground, blood trailing from a wound on her forehead. For a split second, everything vanished. The contest, the competition, the logic. Nothing else mattered. He fell to his knees beside her, gripping her hand. "Regina, don't you dare leave me again," he whispered, his voice shaking. Connell arrived, pulling Chuks back as medics rushed in. "She'll be okay," Connell said. "But you need to face it now, Chuks." Chuks turned to him, chest heaving. "Face what?" Connell sighed. "That this contest was never about finding a wife. You already found her years ago." Chuks swallowed hard, staring at Regina's unconscious face. Connell was right. He had spent all these years trying to build something logical, structured, but love wasn't logical. It was her. It had always been her. And now he had to fight to keep her. To be continued. A tragic turn. The silence in the hospital waiting room was deafening. Chuks paced the floor relentlessly, his fingers curled into tight fists as the events of the night replayed in his mind. Regina had been rushed into emergency care the moment the medics arrived. She had been unconscious, her skin pale, her breathing weak. And for the first time in years, Chuks felt completely helpless. Connell sat nearby, watching his friend with a knowing expression. "You can stop pretending now," Connell said finally, breaking the silence. Chuks stopped pacing and turned sharply. "What are you talking about?" Connell sighed. "That this contest still matters to you. That any of these other women matter to you." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "It's been Regina from the moment she walked in. And now, after tonight? You can't keep lying to yourself." Chuks exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples. "I don't know what to do," he admitted. "If I end the contest now, it'll look like I planned all of this for her. It'll undermine everything." Connell tilted his head. "And if she doesn't wake up?" The words hit Chuks like a sledgehammer. His entire body tensed, his throat tightening. "You need to stop thinking about business, optics, and strategy," Connell said firmly. "And start thinking about what matters." Chuks clenched his jaw, his heart pounding in his chest. At that moment, the door to the emergency room swung open. A doctor stepped out, her expression professional but neutral. Chuks was at her side in an instant. "How is she?" His voice was raw, strained. "She's stable," the doctor assured him. "But she suffered a concussion and a deep cut on her forehead. She was lucky the injuries weren't worse." Chuks released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "When can I see her?" he asked, his voice quieter now. "She just woke up," the doctor said with a small smile. "She's asking for you." The reunion. Chuks stepped into the hospital room, his chest tightening as he saw her lying in the bed. Regina's face was pale, a bandage wrapped around her forehead, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. But she was alive. And when she looked up at him, A small smile curled on her lips. "You look like hell," she murmured. Chuks let out a breathy laugh, his throat thick with emotion. "You scared the hell out of me." Regina shifted slightly, wincing. "I'm fine, Chuks." He moved to her bedside, sitting down in the chair, his hands gripping the rails like he needed to anchor himself. "Regina, why?" he finally asked, his voice hoarse. "Why did you run into that storm? Why risk your life like that?" She held his gaze, her eyes soft yet unwavering. "Because someone needed help," she said simply. Chuks shook his head. "You could have died." Regina sighed. "And so could the person I saved. I couldn't just stand by and do nothing." His chest tightened painfully. That was who she was. That was why he loved her. He reached for her hand, hesitating for only a second before taking it in his own. Her fingers curled around his instinctively, like they belonged there. "I thought I lost you once," Chuks admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "And I swore I wouldn't let that happen again." Regina's breath hitched. "Chuks?" He squeezed her hand. "I don't care about the contest anymore," he said firmly. "I don't care about what anyone thinks. I just care about you." Tears welled in Regina's eyes, but she blinked them away quickly. For a long time, neither of them spoke. They didn't need to, because in that moment, everything they had ever lost was finally being found again. The announcement that changed everything. 2 days later, the remaining contestants were gathered in the main hall of Obi Resort. Whispers filled the air. Regina was missing, and so was Chuks. The tension was suffocating. Finally, the large doors swung open, and Chuks walked in. The room fell into complete silence. His face was unreadable, his movements controlled. Then he spoke. "The contest is over." Gasps echoed through the hall. "The purpose of this competition was to find someone I could trust, someone who could stand by my side, not just in the easy moments, but in the hardest ones." He exhaled. "And I realized something these past few days." He turned, and in that moment, the doors behind him opened, and Regina walked in. The shock that ran through the remaining contestants was almost tangible. Chuks didn't hesitate. He turned to face her, his heart pounding. "Regina, I spent years trying to convince myself I didn't need you," he said. "That I had moved on. That what we had was just something from the past." He stepped closer. "But the truth is, I never stopped loving you." Regina's breath caught. Chuks reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Gasps filled the room. The remaining contestants could only watch in stunned silence as Chuks got down on one knee. "Regina Okafor," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't need a contest to tell me what I already know." He opened the box, revealing a breathtaking diamond ring. "You are my past, my present, and my future," he continued. "I spent too much time letting the world make my decisions for me. But this is my choice." A deep breath. "Regina, will you marry me?" Tears spilled down Regina's cheeks as she nodded quickly. "Yes," she whispered. 1,000 times, yes. The room erupted into stunned applause. The contest was over, and Chuks Obi had finally found his wife. To be continued. Love, finally chosen. A new beginning. The news spread like wildfire. Billionaire Chuks Obi had ended his controversial wife-finding contest and proposed to his first love, Regina Okafor. The media went crazy. Social media exploded with mixed reactions. Some people cheered, calling it the greatest love story of the decade. Others called it a scam, claiming the contest had been rigged from the start. But Chuks didn't care. For the first time in his life, he was making a decision that wasn't based on logic, business, or strategy. This was about his heart, and he had finally found the courage to follow it. Regina's response to the world. As expected, the media swarmed Regina. Every journalist, blogger, and talk show host wanted an exclusive interview. Was she in the contest just to reconnect with Chuks? Had she planned this all along? How did she feel about the other contestants who had been eliminated unfairly? Regina remained graceful through it all. In an exclusive interview, she said, "I entered the contest not knowing what to expect. I didn't come here for Chuks. I came here to prove to myself that I was capable of standing in any room, with any person, and holding my own. But fate had other plans. And I'm not ashamed to say that love found me in the most unexpected way. Her response silenced many critics. Even some of the eliminated contestants admitted that she had won fairly. Because love isn't something you plan. It's something that chooses you. The wedding announcement. A week after the engagement, Chuks made another major announcement. The wedding was happening in 4 weeks. No long engagement. No drawn-out wedding planning. Just 2 people who had already waited too long to be together. The event was set to be the most exclusive, high-profile wedding Nigeria had seen in years. Dignitaries, celebrities, and top business moguls from across Africa were expected to attend. The entire country was buzzing with excitement. And Chuks? For the first time in years, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. The final night before the wedding. The night before the wedding, Chuks and Regina stood on the balcony of his Lagos penthouse, staring at the city lights. The wedding planners were handling the final details. Their families were in town, waiting for the grand ceremony. But in this quiet moment, it was just the 2 of them. Regina sighed, leaning on the railing. "Did you ever imagine this would happen?" she asked softly. Chuks chuckled, shaking his head. "Oh, I thought I lost you forever." Regina turned to him. "And now?" He cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing her cheek. "Now, I know that some things are worth fighting for." She smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "You sure you're ready for this?" she teased. Chuks grinned. "Regina, I have built billion-dollar businesses. I have sat across from the most powerful men in the world. But nothing has ever made me feel the way you do." He kissed her forehead, pulling her close. "So yes," he whispered. "I'm ready." The grand wedding. The morning of the wedding, the world watched as guests arrived at the exclusive private estate where the ceremony would take place. The venue was a dream, a mix of traditional Nigerian elegance and modern luxury. Golden chandeliers hung from the tented ceiling. White roses and fresh palm leaves decorated every corner. A grand aisle stretched toward a magnificent altar, where Chuks stood, waiting. And then the moment came. The music changed. The doors opened. And Regina stepped out. The crowd gasped. She was a vision in white, her gown a perfect blend of modern sophistication and classic African royalty. A handcrafted lace veil covered her face, and when she walked toward Chuks, every step felt like a promise finally being fulfilled. The vows. When she reached the altar, Chuks gently lifted her veil, his breath catching as he looked into the eyes of the woman he had waited his whole life for. The officiant smiled. "Do you, Chuks Obi, take Regina Okafor to be your wife?" Chuks' voice was deep and steady. "I do." "And do you, Regina Okafor, take Chuks Obi to be your husband?" Regina's voice trembled with emotion. "I do." And with that, they were married. When Chuks pulled her in for their first kiss as husband and wife, the crowd erupted into thunderous applause. The billionaire bachelor was no longer a bachelor. He had found his queen. And he had made her his forever. The reception, a celebration of love. The reception was legendary. Fireworks lit up the night sky. Afrobeats and high-life music filled the air. Guests dined on the most exquisite dishes, while traditional dancers performed to honor the couple. Chuks and Regina danced under the stars, completely lost in each other. "You know," Regina whispered, "you never actually finished the contest?" Chuks chuckled. "Did I need to?" She laughed, shaking her head. "Oh, I think I won the moment I walked back into your life." He leaned in, his lips grazing her ear. "Correction," he murmured. "We both won." And as they stood there, surrounded by family, friends, and a love that had survived time, distance, and fate itself, they both knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning of a family tree. The end. If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing heartwarming stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your support. See you soon.